let's see, a little bit about me. So, and a little bit about tonight. So, Desiree has asked me to come talk about the heart tonight. And, um, as you can see, well, maybe you can't see, but as you've heard, I'm sure, my name is Batul True Heart. And that's actually a name that I gave myself about 15 years ago. Um, well, Batul is an Arabic name. That name came to me. It's still a big mystery. I don't usually talk about it too much because I don't have known Arabic ancestors, although I do believe I have further back Arabic ancestors, and maybe some of them are trying to talk to me for some reason. So I have that name Batul, but I have the name True Heart. That's the part that I really gave to myself. And the reason I gave it to myself is because it's really my goal. It's been my goal to get out of my head and into my heart, because I'm someone who has spent a lot of time up here. And I come from a lot of childhood trauma. I come from a lot of domestic violence. So there was drug addiction in my family, methamphetamine addiction, a lot of like hard stuff from the beginning. And of course, not only in my life, but my parents' life, my grandparents' life, and the more that I learn about my ancestors and what they went through, and I've got a lot of different ancestors, right? I have got, indigenous ancestors that not too long ago were, shot in lines, um, beheaded, I've got all that happening less than 100 years ago, And then I also have colonizer ancestors, the ones who did the perpetrating, So as a healer, I work with all of that, and I work with how does that live in me, that pain. So yeah, really, I've been on a mission to understand where all this pain comes from, right? Because I can tell, like, yes, I have pain from my life, but this is bigger, right? This is ancestral pain. So that's really been a lot of my like my mission or my study, is like, okay, where does this pain come from? And then the second part is, I've been on a quest to, what to do about it. What do we do when we feel so much pain, so much stuckness, so in our heads, right? Not feeling, but up here. And a lot of time that means we're worrying or stressing about something. So often, I find that the medicine I need actually lives within me, and it actually lives in my heart. And if I can keep kind of taking this, sometimes I think of it as like an elevator ride, right? It seems like a short elevator ride, but sometimes it's the longest one we'll ever take, right? Because there are certain subjects, there are certain people, it is so hard to get into our heart about it because, there's a lot. Um, so yeah, I feel grateful that this is the subject tonight, because this is really, like, it's been awesome to even think about this class, because really this is the foundation of my work, really is how do we live our lives from our hearts? How do we take that elevator down? All right. Okay, so I did a little slideshow for us to have a little bit of visual. So heart medicine. It's what I called this class tonight. This is actually, I bought these marigolds at the Saturday farmers market here at Lakeshore. And I remember I picked them up and they look like a heart. So just made those the cover. These are just a few words in different languages for heart that I wanted to share. So, in English, we have heart, of course. In Espanol, we've got corazón. In my language, my indigenous language, I'm Yaqui or Yoeme. We are people from what's now southern Arizona and northern Mexico. In our language, Yoeme, we call the heart Hayapsi. And then for those of you, some of you may know this, this last word here is of the Nahuatl language. And so this is how we say heart in Nahuatl, which is one indigenous to Mexico language. And so in Nawa, it's Yolo. All right. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the anatomical heart. And so this is kind of this is a photo or a painting here of an anatomical heart. And I think the things on top, there's arteries and capillaries at the bottom here. We can look and see exactly what the parts of the heart are. But what I did want to say is share is just more about what is the physical job of the heart, right? Because it's an important organ, right? Like it really gives us life. When the heart stops beating, that's it. That's the end, right? That's like the last breath. So the heart is, it really keeps us going. It really keeps us alive. And so the heart actually sits and it's really great to know. It's good to know the inside of our body, to get to know kind of what things are, where things are, and what they do. But the heart sits between our lungs. So we've got our lungs on the sides and our heart in the middle. And I remember someone once described to me that the lungs were the wings of the heart. But the heart sits behind and slightly to the left of our breastbone. So it's not right in the center. Our heart's not right in the center. It's just a little bit to the left. And so I invite you to, maybe just put your hand on your heart, just get to know where it's at, feel it beating. It's good to know. It's a main organ in our body, and it pumps blood through the blood vessels and into the circulatory system. That pumped blood carries oxygen and other nutrients that go to the brain and go to other organs. So it has a huge function to pump blood and have that go all throughout our body to all the organs and to the brain. So that's our physical heart, our anatomical heart. But then we also have our emotional heart, and actually they're related. We learned that. So Desiree mentioned this class that I taught this last fall called we called it Aires Fuerte, Strong Winds, and it was about the 13 most difficult emotions that we as humans must learn to face. And it's hard to remember all off the top of my head, but the difficult emotions, right? What are those? They're shame and guilt and fear and anger and jealousy and resentment and sadness and sorrow and guilt and ego. And there's a few more. Anxiety is one of them. And so, there's these actual emotions, which, they're so mysterious, right? They're like these invisible forces, right? It's like, where do these feelings come from? But at the same time, they're so real, right? Like they feel so real. They are so real to us. So, in that class, we went deep into each emotion. What is it? What does it feel like? Why is it here? And also, where in the body do we tend to feel it? And also a part of that, and if any of you study traditional Chinese medicine, this is really, a big part of traditional Chinese medicine, is that every organ is actually connected to a particular emotion. So, for instance, like the liver is said to store anger. So that's where the liver has a connection with anger. And the kidneys have a connection with fear, right? So we can think about that. Like if I'm feeling a lot of fear, probably physically, there's probably some sort of blockage happening in my kidney, or something's happening. Maybe I have a lot of toxins in my body. And so there's something that's impacting my kidneys. So just even with that little bit information, I can think, oh, okay, I'm feeling really fearful a lot lately. Let me do things to flush out my kidneys, right? Let me do things to, let me drink more water. Maybe I'll take some herbs that are good for the kidneys. And it's amazing how just that can actually help not only strengthen the physical kidneys, but also release that fear that we may be feeling. And so the same goes with the heart. The heart is actually the heart and the lungs, kind of this whole area. And you can look at even this picture here and think of it that way, right? You can think of that heart in the middle as our anatomical heart, and you can think of those wings as our lungs. But the emotion that is connected to our heart and the lungs is grief. It's grief, it's sadness, it's sorrow. And in Ides Verte, we talk about, kind of the difference between sadness and sorrow. They're very similar, right? They're both sad. They're both hurt feelings. But sorrow tends to be more about when we lose someone. So sorrow, is really like when someone dies, we can really experience great sorrow. Or, even like a breakup or some sort of the person isn't in our life anymore. Um, so yeah, the heart really, this is where we feel and store grief. It's interesting too. Oh, I forgot to mention. So there's actually a wall in our heart as well, like an actual physical wall that separates the sides. And I was thinking about that earlier too, just how interesting, because the heart kind of feels kind of double-sided to me that way, right? It's like it is where I feel heartbreak. It's where I feel pain, sadness, sorrow. But the heart also, right, is where we feel joy, where we feel happiness, where we can feel a sense of peace. When our heart is steady and calm, we may feel a sense of peace. So I just thought it's interesting, all that this organ holds, and all that, yeah, that we feel in this place, and how painful emotional pain can be, right? But it's almost indescribable, right? Because yeah, it's just like that deep. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say so far about the emotional heart. So this was something I said some years ago. I thought of it today, so I put it here. It's actually really smart to think with my heart. So yeah, I kind of mentioned this in the prayer earlier, so I've been thinking about this too, like, and actually this has to do with, I feel like this has to do with patriarchy, actually. I feel like there's been some, part of patriarchy has been to deny feelings, right? To deny the heart. And, to be very much in our heads, and to be, to put intelligence, mental intelligence above everything, right? Above emotion, definitely above emotion, right? And above connection. But it's all been about up here and how smart we are and how much, maybe how much schooling we've had. But really, my feeling is actually it's really smart to think with my heart. And yeah, it can be, sometimes and I mentioned this in the prayer too, sometimes, especially these days, there's so much to be in our heads about, and I want to say something, our minds are incredible, shout out to our minds. There's nothing wrong with our, well, there might be some things wrong with our minds, but But this is actually an important organ too, the brain, right? We need it, we need reasoning, we need, to think things through, it's important. But it's not the only thing. And I really feel that when we honor our mind and we check in with our heart, that when we kind of bring those both into alignment, um and then if we really bring it into alignment with our words, if we can really use both, then these words, these like incredible, eloquent, perfect words can come out. And even when we're angry, that's the thing, like, being in my heart, living from my heart, does not mean I don't have big emotions, because if you know me, I do. Does not mean that I'm not angry. If you know me, I am. But what my commitment to my heart means is that, I do my best to try to respond rather than react, right? Because reaction kind of is just coming from here. It's just, it sees something wrong, and it's just like that. But if we take some time, whether that's a few moments, a few breaths, a few days, a few weeks, sometimes we need that space to get into our heart. Sometimes it takes that long, right? Sometimes we need space from another person just so we can access that place in ourselves again, because it's too difficult. Um, so I come talking about the heart with it, with no, in no way, coming from just a kind of lovey-dovey, oh, it's all good, it's all love. No, like, I'm not, absolutely not coming from that place, because it's not all good. um but where I am coming from is, I think there's a lot of power and medicine when we align our minds with our heart. um I wanted to talk a little bit also about the temperatures, and how, we've say these words sometime about how people have a cold heart, right? They're cold hearted. And in traditional medicine and traditional indigenous medicine, cold, the temperature cold is connected and related to death, right? When we die, all the blood stops circulating, our heart stops pumping it, and we're not warm anymore. We start to turn cold. And that is also what happens to our heart. If we do not warm it up, if we do not get present to it, think about it, nourish it, live from it, feel it, then our heart actually starts to get cold. And when our heart gets cold, it starts to harden. So you've heard all of this, right? Cold hearted, hardened heart, hardened my heart, like a hard heart, all of that stuff. It's actually real. That's what happens. And if you think about it, you can think of some folks that right? Who do you know that has a cold heart, who has a bitter heart, and that, unfortunately, it tends to happen more and more to it, as adults. The older we get, the more disconnected we get. And so our hearts get cold. We stop connecting, we stop feeling, and we stop caring. So many people stop doing that. And so I know all of us, most likely know someone who just, if we think about it, it's like, oh yeah, they've hardened their heart. They're cold in that area. Now, at the same time, I mean, I know we can also think of ourselves, right? Ourselves. There may be, maybe our heart's not completely cold or hardened, but there may be some people that it is hardened to, or some topics that, have it feel that way. But the other side of that is, you know, who are the people in your life that actually have a warm heart, what we'd call a good heart, you know? Um, sometimes we think about our grandmothers, that's maybe who we knew or know in our life, who has a warm heart, who's thinking about other people, who cares about us. And same thing, we can look at ourselves, a lot of us, for myself, I feel like, I have a good heart. When I was a kid, I remember like there's some core values, some core ways of being that I feel are really in me, but throughout the years at the same time with life and with pain and difficulty, there's also, I also have pain in my heart. It's not as open and expansive as I wish it would be, as I want it to be, as I'm working on it to be. So um so yeah, that's the good thing, is to know that there are things we can do to warm our heart up again and to expand our heart. um let's see, I just wanted to touch in a little bit again. I know I talked about responding, reacting versus responding. And again, I just want to remind us, we can, it's a lot of this, I think a lot of the healing these days is about getting out of binaries. Like things are just one way or another, um, it's like we can be firm, we can be straightforward, we can mean what we say, we can say it in a direct way, we can do all of that while at the same time coming from our heart. And what that means, it's like we can be direct without, right? What would not coming from our heart look like, right? That would probably look like, diminishing somebody, maybe diminishing someone's character, calling them names, being verbally abusive, um, being physically abusive, being emotionally abusive. These are not qualities of the heart. These are often, um, reactions of the mind, um, because our mind, something goes wrong in our mind, tells us to fight, and it tells us to protect. And not to say there aren't times for that. There may be times for that, especially protection. We do need to protect ourselves on certain levels. We are human beings. We're fragile. We're mortal. We die. So it is important that we protect ourselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, and at the same time, a lot about coming from the heart also is remembering that we're all connected, that we're all people. And no matter what, even though, there's levels of oppression and marginalization and all of that, absolutely. And at the same time, we are all severely traumatized. So a lot of the time, coming into a heart is really about remembering our humanity. Can we remember our humanity? And again, how can we stand for what's right, hold ourselves and others accountable, and remember our humanity? Be compassionate. All right, so I just wanted to share too. I love to share these red roses. These were my great grandmother Pastora. She actually was the first person to come here from Panama in my family to the U.S. in the 1950s. But she grew these red roses. She had a little trailer here that she lived 2 hours north of here, Oakland, in Ukiah, where I grew up. And she had this rose bush, and my tia took a cutting, and now I have that rose bush in my backyard. And every year I get these beautiful red roses. So, and roses, we're going to talk a little bit about roses at the end. They are an incredible heart medicine. All right, so heart medicines. So really it's, what brings us back to the heart, right? Again, we can think about this little elevator ride from here to here, when we get really stuck up here. And, I'm a Gemini, I'm air, it's like my place. And I love my mind, believe me. I can think and down to the detail, right? Um, but when it's also for me too, when do I feel the best? When do I feel the most peace? It's when I breathe, slow down the pace of my heart, come into my body, feel more calm, and feel that medicine of my heart. So there are many things we can do to take care of our heart, bring us back into our heart, but these were some that came to mind today. So, one really, you know, important piece that, seems basic, but we often forget is to breathe. And of course, we're all breathing, right? We have to breathe just to be alive. But, I know for myself, as someone who comes from, pretty severe childhood trauma, um, I have always had a hard time breathing. Like, I often hold my breath, like all day. I'm just kind of holding my breath. So it's something, as I've, taken on my healing throughout my life, that I practice. I try to focus on is, all right, am I breathing? Just basic, like, am I breathing right now as I'm talking to you, as I'm talking to anybody? Am I breathing or am I holding my breath? So I'd love to offer that to you, just to like be conscious of that. Are you one who tends to hold your breath? Could you remind yourself just to breathe a little bit more? And then there are actual breathing exercises that can help too. And I did want to share one with you. Um, there's a simple one that I love, which is breathing in for a count of 4. So it'd be like 4, and then holding it for 4, and then exhaling for 4. And doing that 4 times. And it's so amazing. Like, oxygen is this medicine that's just always available for us. It's always here. We don't need money. We don't need a garden. We don't need a store. It's all here. So I think there's, so much that we can receive and really get out of just breathing more. And that's actually what happens when we breathe deeper. Our heartbeat starts to slow down. Our heartbeat starts to have more of a steady pace. This is really great for folks who have anxiety like myself. And so, yeah. And then when that heartbeat is more steady, then we feel more a sense of calm, more of a sense of peace.
Excuse me, Batul, to interject. Do you mind taking us through that breathing exercise?
I would love to. Why don't we go ahead and do it 4 times? Thank you for that. Okay, so once again, I'll invite you to lower or close your eyes. And then just to explain what we're doing. So we'll go ahead and together we'll breathe in on a count of 4. We'll hold for 4 counts, and then we'll exhale for 4 counts. Okay? So we'll go ahead and inhale. And hold. And exhale. All right, let's do that again. Inhale. Hold. And exhale. Two more times. Inhale. Hold. And exhale. And inhale. Hold. And exhale. Great. Thank you. Yeah, and I love this because again, it's like this is something that we can always carry with us, right? We don't need anything. It's just us. So even if we can take, what did that take us? Like 3 minutes, right? 3 minutes can really just like kind of recalibrate us, have us feel more calm, have us feel more present. Awesome. I feel it too. It's like, okay. Crying. So this is this is one of my favorite things to do. um really taking some time to cry. So again, this is, societally, socially, like this, you know, patriarchal society has taught us that crying is weak. We shouldn't cry, men shouldn't cry, strong people shouldn't cry, all of that. And but we know, and traditional people know, and healers know that crying is, it's a cleansing. It's actually how our body cleanses all this stuck and stored emotion, and it's so important. And for a lot of folks, it's hard to cry. And at times I've had that. I'm like a huge crier, but I have experienced that at times where like it's hard when you have all these kind of stuck feelings in you and you feel them, but you can't really get that release. um on the other hand, there are those of us like myself where I cry all the time, to the point where sometimes I have to tell myself to stop crying, at least for now, to get up. Okay, we'll come back to it later. But what I will say, and this is something that I teach in Aires Fuerte, that I encourage all, everyone, myself, everyone to do, is to take time to cry. I probably cry every day. And, I think we should be crying, and because we should be releasing so much. And especially these days, like we hold so much. There's so much, like, right when there's some, terrible thing that goes on, there's another terrible thing. And we can't even grieve this thing because there's this thing. And now there's this, there's so much happening so fast these days that, if we can take time to, even 10 minutes to cry. And, I know sometimes people are afraid to kind of open that can of worms, right? Because it can feel like, man, if I cry now, I may not stop. But if we can start to practice and kind of learn how to cry, right? A little bit of here, a little bit each day. It's such a beautiful and effective way to release and to kind of just come back into, a clear spot again, to kind of clean the slate, clear the slate. Um, and at the end, we're going to have questions and answers. So please, if there's any questions, please um, save those so I can answer those as well. Nature as well. And, that's, probably one of the biggest parts of why we're so disconnected, why we're so heavy, why things are so difficult, is because, we have lost, because of capitalism and patriarchy and all the things, right? We have lost very, in many ways, we've lost our, natural innate connection to the natural world, right? To nature. Our ancestors, our indigenous ancestors, and when I say indigenous ancestors, I mean all of our ancestors, no matter where your ancestors are from, like the original people who, cared for the earth and, were connected to all things. They had very deep relationships with nature. They talked to nature just like they would talk to God or talk to anybody. Um, because that nature reciprocated. We, indigenous people, still, we are in a relationship, we're in a reciprocity with things we can see, whether that's plants, whether that's trees, and then also with the things we can't see sometimes too, with ancestors and spirits and energies. So another way to get into our heart is to commune with nature. And communing with nature often means communing with the elements. So um, this can be a wonderful place to go to cry, is nature. Sometimes, maybe we don't have a safe place at home where we really feel we can let go, but maybe there's somewhere in the woods we know we can go, or there's a tree we can go to cry and to talk to and to release some of the heaviness that we feel. Another thing, great thing to do is to get into our body to feel. I know for myself, with the kind of trauma I've had, yeah, it's hard for me. Probably one of the hardest things for me to do is relax. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but to like relax my body is difficult. And the two things that I'd say, really do it for me are massage, which I'm really missing right now with COVID. But I would, when I get a massage, when like, it usually takes about, 20 to 30 minutes just to even like get there to relax into it. But once I do, that's like, oh, okay, I can actually feel myself, feel my heart, feel my body. Um, so yeah, and then, oh yeah, I was going to say, so massage and also water. So like hot water, that's also another place that like gets me into my body, has me feel in my body. So, I often take baths with herbs and hot water, and that, yeah, it's very nourishing. And it's often also the place where I tend to cry too, is in the bath or the shower. And herbal medicine. And we're going to actually, in a moment, I'm going to shut off the slides, and we're going to talk a little bit about some herbal medicine for the heart as well. I think I just had one last slide here. So yeah, we can talk more about this at the end. But if you did want to just write down my Instagram here, I do offer classes and stuff like that just to keep in touch, and then also my email as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Desiree. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I hope we cross paths again. Thank you.